The following disclaimer is for those in California only. Pursuant to California Assembly Bill 2571, it is illegal for the advertisement and or marketing of any firearm-related products and or programs in a manner that is designed, intended, or reasonably appears to be attractive to minors. As such, if you are currently in California, this program is restricted to only those that are over 18. Please turn this program off now if you are in California and under 18. Now, on to the program. Hello and welcome to the centertenspodcast. Centertens is a podcast that discusses small bore and precision air rifle from junior shooting sports on up to NCAA collegiate and Olympic competition. And now here's your host, Adam Pearson. Welcome back to another episode of Centertens. In this episode, we're going to be looking at three different events. First, we're going to be looking at the Zippy Open that was held at the University of Akron. Then we're going to be looking at the USA Shooting Olympic Trials that was held down at Fort Moore, or Fort Benning for those people who've been around this field for a while. And then we're going to be looking at This Week in Rifle in the NCAA. There were two matches held this past weekend, and we'll be reviewing those. So let's go ahead and get started with the Zippy Open. That was held, again, like I said, at the University of Akron in Schrank Hall, which is where they do their shooting. They've got two separate ranges. They do have a small bore and a air rifle range. The course of fire for this match, there was one USA Shooting 3x20 small bore match, which was 60 shots in 90 minutes, 20 shots in kneeling, 20 shots in prone, and then 20 shots in standing. That was scored integer scoring, which is in whole numbers. Then there was a international air rifle match, which is 60 shots all standing in 75 minutes, which was scored in decimal. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you the top 10 shooters. Now, they had the way they scored, which was kind of strange, allowed the shooters to shoot more than once. So there was a couple shooters that ended up in the top 10 more than once. So instead of listing them twice, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and give the top 10 shooters. So if a shooter was in there more than once, I just skipped over their other matches and went to the next person. In small bore, the top 10 shooters was Lex Kirk from Akron with a 591 with 40 centers. Then there was Gavin Perkowski from Akron. He had a 590 with 36 centers. You had Aaron Schnupp from Akron with a 587 and 40 centers. You then had Paige Hollowell of Ohio State with a 586 and 30 centers. You had Jack Ogurek, which was a junior, with 583 and 33 centers. Derek Kaiser of Ohio State, they 583 and 32 centers. And then the last four juniors, you had Ashlyn Blake with a 582 and 34 centers, Riley Dunn with a 582 and 31 centers, Emmy Walrath with a 581 and 31 centers, and Caitlin Sullivan with a 581 and 28 centers. And in air rifle, I'm going to list them the same way, skipping over again if they were doubled, going down to the next person. Air rifle. You had Gavin Perkowski of Akron with a 625.7 and 51 centers. You then had Emmy Walrath, who also had a 625.7, but with 50 centers. Claudia Music, Jr., with 625.1 and 46 centers. Jacob Wiseman, a junior, with 623.9 and 52 centers. Andre Gross of Akron with a 623.8 and 51 centers. Jack Ogurek, a junior, with a 622.8 and 51 centers. Ashlyn Blake, a junior, 622.6 with 50 centers. Derek Kaiser of Ohio State with a 619.8 and 43 centers. Haley Singleton with an even 619 and 41 centers. Andrew DeRoss from Akron with a 618.8 and 42 centers. So that's it for the Zippy. We're going to move on to the USA Shooting match, Olympic Trials here in just a moment, just after this. Moving on to the USA Shooting Olympic Trials. These were held over this weekend from October 28th through November 3rd. And what I'm going to do is go over both the men's results, then the women's results, in both air rifle and small bore. So for the men's results in 3-position small bore, what we'll do is I'm going to give the 8 that made finals and then their final scores and what they placed. So the 8 shooters that were in finals was Ivan Rowe with a 2-day total of 1178 and 71 centers. Then you had Nick Maurer with a 2-day total of 1168 and 57 centers. Peter Fiore with a 2-day total of 1169, 56 centers. Tyler Wee's total was 1169 and 60 centers. Matthew Sanchez with a 1170 and 62 centers. Timothy Sherry with 1172 and 66 centers. Jared Eddy with 1168 and 58 centers. And the finals participant was Gavin Barnick with 1169 and 57 centers. The top 3, the winners in the men's 3-position after finals, were Ivan Rowe was in first with a 457. Nick Maurer came in second with a 452.5. And Peter Fiore came in third with a 441.2. In the women's 3-position, top 8 there was Mary Tucker had 1172 and 63 centers. Sagan Madalena had 1177 and 64 centers. Katie Zahn with an 1170 and 55 centers. Isabella Baldwin with an 1166 and 55 centers. Allison Weiss had 1163 and 58 centers. Molly McGinn with an 1168, 53 centers. Gracie Din had 1162 and 47 centers. And Gabriela Zeik came in in the 8th with 1171 and 47 centers. And the top 3 shooters, Katie Zahn came in third with a 439.7. Sagan Madalena was a 452.9. Mary Tucker won finals with a 456.8. Moving on to air rifle. Go ahead and do the women since I've got that here in front of me. Again, the top 8 shooters was Mary Tucker with a 1259.1. Sagan Madalena with a 1260.9. Gabriela Zeik with a 1251.8. Virginia Thrasher with a 1251.4. Allison Weiss with a 1261.2. Jean Haverhill with a 1254.4. And Katie Zahn with a 1255.5. And the 8th shooter was Kristen Hemphill with a 1254.3. And after the finals, Gabriela Zeik came in third with a 227.8. Sagan Madalena with a 251.7. And Mary Tucker again came in first with a 252.3. And for the men's air rifle finals, you had Ivan Rowe with a 1263.5. Brandon Muskie with a 1250 even. Timothy Sherry with a 1252 even. Rylan Kissel with a 1255.8. Gavin Barnick with a 1251.9. Lucas Kaczynski with a 1251.8. Also with a 1251.8 was Peter Fiore. And the 8th person in the finals was Patrick Sunderman with a 1249.5. Top 3 shooters. Timothy Sherry came in third after finals with a 122.7. Brandon Muskie came in second with a 250.7. And Ivan Rowe came in first with a 251.6. And now we're going to move on to this week at NCAA with the matches that were held this weekend. So the 2 matches that were held in NCAA competition this week, the first match was held on Saturday. That was Army against Memphis. And Army pulled out just a little bit ahead of Memphis in that match with an aggregate score of 46-71 to Memphis 46-48. Scoring teams for Army in small bore was Anusha Packham with a 584, Chris Jennings with a 580, Claudia Siegel with a 579, and Kyle Cutts with a 577. That gave them a small bore total of 2320. And an air rifle, Kyle Cutts with a 592, Anusha Packham with a 590, Chris Jennings with a 588, and Claudia Siegel with a 581. That gave them a total score of 2351 in air rifle. The top shooter for Army was Anusha Packham with 1174 total. For Memphis, their scoring team was in small bore, Kenley Uton with a 579, Mason Douglas with a 575, Sophie Cruz with a 574, and also with a 574 was Sam Sparrow. And in air rifle, Jack Kersey with a 591, Kenley Uton with a 589, Sophie Cruz with a 583, and Sam Sparrow also with a 583. And the top shooter from Memphis was Kenley Uton with an 1168. The other match that was held was on Sunday. That was between Murray State and UT Martin. Murray State topped that match with a 46-95 against UT Martin's 46-12. Murray State's scoring team was Paola Parvarati with a 589, John Blanton with a 584, Alok Jordan with a 579, and Scott Patterson with a 578. Gave them a total of a 23-30 in small bore. In air rifle, Alok Jordan with a 592. Also with a 592 was Matthias Kuru, Allison Henry with a 591, and Scott Patterson with a 590. That gave them a total of 23-65 in air. Murray State's top shooter was Alok Jordan with an 1171. For UT Martin, their small bore team was Alina Walther with a 582, Nicholas Fairs with a 580, Joseph Kovach with a 579, and Jesse Chamberlain with a 574. That gave them a total of a 23-05 in small bore. And in air, Nicholas Fairs with a 590, Alina Walther with a 583, Joseph Kovach with a 567, and also with a 567 was Aubrey Summers. And UT Martin's top shooter was Nicholas Fairs with a total score of 1170. So that's going to be it for the matches that was held this past weekend. And we've got a full slate of competitions coming up this weekend. On October 6th, which is Friday, you've got Ole Miss versus Jacksonville State. They're at Murray, Kentucky for that match. And then on Saturday, you got Murray State and Ole Miss competing against each other. Then you've got Ohio State traveling to Nebraska. You've got North Georgia against Georgia Southern. Akron versus West Virginia. UTEP versus Air Force. Got Wofford versus the Citadel. And then you also have Morehead State against Murray State. That's on Saturday. And then on Sunday, North Georgia against Wofford. Morehead State against UT Martin, and TCU against Georgia Southern. So next week we should have a full list of matches to discuss during this week in NCAA competition. So that'll be it for this week. Hope you enjoyed the show today, and we will look forward to seeing you next week. And again, as we always say, the most important shot is always the shot that's in front of you. Thank you for listening to Season 1 of Center Tens. If you like the show, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This helps out tremendously. Give us a follow on Instagram and Facebook at Center Tens. Center Tens can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Buzzsprout, Pocket Cast, and at centertens.com. Hope you join us for our next episode.